Afternoon. What's going on? What's happening? Everyone's still awake? I think I had a little nap at the back. It's my fault. I got it at 1:30 and just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Super excited to be here this afternoon and lead this panel. I met the panelists briefly, real quick, earlier, and happy to be joining you from Treaty 4 territory in Saskatchewan, the land where you can watch your dog run away for 3 days. That's where I'm from. Colin wanted to give me a little bit of information, just so you a little elevator spiel on the National Circle for Indigenous Ag and Food, and that's who I'm here with today. So we are a nonprofit that is built around around what the story you just heard. So T Creek's model, the marginalization, everything that did it, there's a lot of conversations over a lot of years that we need to reinvigorate and support and get the Indigenous ag space back to where it should be. So a lot of conversations happened over 3 or 4 years, and no one had any money. And it was just not going to happen. And then we found the 215 unmarked graves in Kamloops. And what that did was it spurred industry to say, we're not going to have meetings about this anymore. We're going to do it. Your lunch sponsor today was one of our first givers into the National Circle and founding partner to get it off the ground and running. Yeah, I would give them a round of applause. So they hired an interim CEO in the fall of 2023. Our full-time CEO came on 20 months ago, and in the last, like, actually wasn't with the circle when it started. I got a phone call while I was golfing to say that retirement was over and you're going to come help do this. So 2 weeks after the full-time CEO came into place, I came on board. 20 months, 55 projects across the country in Indigenous communities, from aquaculture, canola, primary, greenhouses, backyard gardens, whatever that is. We are here to provide a concierge service to the Indigenous population across the country for zero charge. So anything that we do, from grant writing to funding to business planning to whatever that looks like, we do not charge a nickel for it, and we don't take anything off the top, thanks to our funders. And we're talking about ag, we're talking about young farmers. We know that you need land, labor, and capital in order to be successful in agriculture. Over 300 million acres across Canada are First Nations access lands, the fastest growing demographic in the country, and the capital is there. If we can put all those things together with the mentorship and the Western culture ag and the research and the data and the analytics, you know what, by 2050, we may end up feeding the world like we need to if we do it in the right way. So I'll leave it at that, Colin. It might have been 3 minutes and not 5, but people are way more interested to hear what you guys have to say than what we're going to be here to talk about today on the Indigenous food sovereignty, sustainability, and cultural safety. And just to kick it right off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves and introduce and what inspired you and your connection to the land and where you're at. We'll start with you, Brian.
Okay, I don't know why I'm so nervous, but so my name is Brian Davis, and I am a relatively new farmer, actually. My farm is under 5 years old, but I've been involved in agriculture much longer than that. We're developing our farm, Taiga Valley Farms and Ranches, is a single farm at the moment with, we've got about 32 acres of cleared land that we're developing into an agroforestry system with integrated row crops and pasture in between the tree rows across the entire property. And there's a lot of other aspects to that. If you're interested, you could always go to our website, taigavalleyfarms.com. Our farm is on the traditional land of Nitassinan, which is the homelands of the Innu Nation of Labrador, as well as Nunatuxavut, which is the people of South Central Labrador. Inuit, Southern Inuit is how they refer to themselves, ourselves. And How I got into agriculture was I started providing services to farmers, mainly around marketing, risk management, some business planning services. And that, right before the pandemic, branched into a ski resort we tried to open. And then COVID came along, and the only thing we could open on the ski resort, 3 days before we were set to open the first lift. And the only thing we could do was open the cafeteria, which turned into a restaurant, which was pork and chicken. And I found it really hard to source pork. So I thought getting some pigs would be a good idea. And from there on. So that's a little bit about me. I'm involved as well in the Labrador Agriculture Association, which previously was the Lake Melville Agricultural Association. I serve the farmers in the agricultural community there as the president of that association, which we're standing back up, in which we are a part. I don't know how we describe it, but we're a part of the NL Federation's ecosystem, and they have been just enormously supportive of the mission of our association. And we're finding ways to really have a positive impact, not just in Labrador, but for the entire province. So that's it for me. Not
Awesome. We'll see who's tougher, Hilary or Boyce. Which one of you is going to go next?
So I'm Boyce Campbell, and this is Hilary Buckle, and we own Black Spruce Homestead just outside of Happy Valley Goose Bay, Labrador. Brian, you said you're a relatively new farmer. We're even newer, and honestly, a lot of times I don't even feel comfortable saying that we're farmers. You know, we're aspiring homesteaders right now, but like we want to learn more and to be able to be self-sufficient, and eventually, you know, branch out and to provide more to the community. But yeah, we live on our off-grid homestead from May to December with our 2 kids, who are 2 and 3.5. So we're busy. And like Ivan said, one of the quotes you had there was, you know, I love big aspirations, but I love small steps more. And I feel like we have big aspirations. But we're finding more and more that, yeah, we need to just take small steps to get to where we're going. What else was I going to say? You can take over.
Sure. So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I guess, my positionality as well, and as an Indigenous person too. So yeah, I would identify as having like settler and Inuit heritage, or being a person of both settler and Inuit descent, so mixed. I'm also a member of the same group as Brian, so Nenatuavut. I have cultural and ancestral ties to southern Labrador and the southeast coast of Labrador. Was raised in the Labrador Straits. Yeah, but I have like some ties to Sandwich Bay as well, in the Cartwright area from my like the Inuit side of my ancestry, and the Buckle. So I came from their English, so that's my European heritage. You asked a little bit about what like our land-based connection as well. So I feel like I'm currently kind of on a journey towards becoming reconnected to the land and to place in Labrador. Grew up on the South Coast, grew up participating in land-based cultural activities, so very much like the seasonal lifestyle, still tied a little bit to the subsistence lifestyle as well. That was passed on to me through my grandparents mainly. But I also see how that's been a little bit disrupted as well. So yeah, the south coast of Labrador was like very colonized essentially. While there was a lot preserved, there's also been a lot to be lost and to be taken back and revitalized as well. So yeah, what brought us to homesteading? So Boyce and I met in Halifax during the pandemic. We're both from the south coast of Labrador originally. And I guess like some of the conversations people have been having today, talking about how during those times of crisis and during the pandemic, it was really we all became very aware collectively about how fragile our food systems are. That's something that we talked about a lot when we first met, and we talked about growing up with a very deep sense of like place-based connection and identity. But then that was passed on mainly through those land-based practices. But then moving away, going to post-secondary, being really steeped in like Western knowledge systems and kind of maybe devaluing those ways of knowing that we inherently had. So when we got together, we were kind of both at a point where we felt we wanted to be reconnected to those traditional ways and for that not to be lost. And we looked at that as like that endeavor as like with a lot of hope, I suppose, that it could be something that could be a healing experience, that it could be something that we could put like our gifts that we have to be more in community with other people and to give back to our community in Labrador as well. So we moved back to Labrador, and we had no like we had this idea of starting a homestead. Basically, we wanted like a big motivation for us was that we wanted to have children, and we wanted them to have a real sense of who they were and where they came from, and for those like cultural and ancestral ties not to be broken, essentially. And we looked at this practice of homesteading as being a place where we could do that, essentially. So that was 5 years ago, and I feel like we've both changed and learned a lot since then. We've become parents of 2 children. And yeah, we've been going through this process of homesteading, learning what it means to homestead, learning what it means to live simply and be self-reliant, and live in close connection with the land. And we do get to experience that, and it has been really beautiful, and it has been really meaningful and healing. But also it's come with challenges, and I think that's a lot of what's I'm hearing is like a shared experience of many people who are new to these things, many Indigenous people who are trying to connect back to and to revitalize that ancestral knowledge, that their right to be food sovereign, essentially. So we're in process and we're learners, and we come to this. I really wanted to position ourselves that way. Yeah, grateful to be here, grateful to learn from you all, grateful to be in conversation.
And what a good segue into, we just watched the Tea Creek video. I'm super lucky to get to work with Jacob for the last couple years and watch him grow. And like was mentioned, he's just going to build another longhouse on the property to get it there, and getting the hands back in the dirt and getting people back there. So what resonated most with you in this story, and how does it reflect or differ from what you're building on your own farm?
I think what spoke to me most at the documentary, what spoke to me most is just really how just taking those steps. So we've as both like from my farm and the Labrador Agricultural Association, this is something that we have talked about. What do they say? Beat the dead horse over. How do we do this? And I think we tend to overcomplicate things. And I think what I took from that is something that kind of hit me harder than I thought about, because we lose a lot of people in our communities, and we need to just take the steps and just move forward in faith because people are dying. So
No, it was a beautiful documentary, and it very much touched me as well. I feel like I have a lot of similarities to Jacob as well. You know, I grew up where, you know, my culture wasn't taught to me as much as, you know, I would have liked to have been. And I feel like I didn't even quite have an interest in it until I was older, to really see that, you know, so much has been lost. And it wasn't like that young man, Justice, you know, like I was in a dark place. And so that was, sorry. I knew that where I was and what I was doing, I was living in Toronto at the time of the pandemic, wasn't feeding my soul, you know? So I really decided to turn back and look to the past for some answers to how I was feeling. And one of the things that I really wanted to do was to, you know, build that relationship with the land, you know, with my people, and to take, you know, new technologies and new ways of learning and to, you know, fuse them together with the old ways so that we could build something that was, you know, resilient, something that was sustainable, that was, you know, feeding not just, you know, the people, but, you know, feeding our souls. And honestly, it's been that and having kids together, it's been like, you know, it's really gave me purpose and meaning. And so I really did, you know, feel like that young man Justice and I had a lot of similarities in that regard. The difference, I guess, in a lot of it is that you know, we were nomadic people. We weren't like Jacob and his band as much in agriculture. So that's why, you know, I want to kind of take that knowledge and that information and really mesh it together with the hunting, you know, the fishing, the foraging, to be able to, you know, provide a life for us and our kids where we're self-sufficient, you know, where we really have that respect for the land, for the animals. And that gives me a lot of meaning and a lot of purpose, and I want to instill that in our children and the community. And like you said, you know, who knows? Maybe the world, right? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for sharing, babe. Yeah, so we were talking, like you touched a little bit about on some of the more serious things happening in our community as well. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the documentary really did hit home in that way. I feel like I have a lot to reflect on. This was my first time watching the film, actually, with all of you. It was very emotional, very impactful. I would say that I felt some resonance with it as well through my own lived experience. I also found it to be very inspiring. I did write down like some things while I was watching. And one thing that Jacob said at the beginning when he was talking about Tea Creek, he said that it was a seed and that it was germinating and putting down roots, but that it was like fragile. And I felt like, wow, I can really relate to that and what we're trying to do. Like, we are in right now probably the stage of being more like a seed, and we're trying to germinate it and water it and to put down roots as well. But that it does, there is a sense of fragility towards it and a sense of like how to take steps forward and how to be successful, for sure. So yeah, it really resonated with me. Also, like how they spoke on food as belonging. Like, yeah, food. I feel like for us and for our communities, it holds a lot of significance beyond just sustenance. Like, yes, it feeds you, it supports you, it gives you energy, it restores you. But also, there's a lot of like cultural significance to food practices and also the communal aspect of it too. So finding like belonging through being able to and meaning through being able to provide for yourself and to be able to provide for your family and then to be able to provide for your community as well. Like that goes to a deeper level, I would say. And even something that was talked on earlier, it's touched on earlier in some talks was like sustainability. Like when we talk about that, like what do we mean? And that there is, yeah, like a real emotional and spiritual component or aspect to that as well. Like that, those were some things I was reflecting on while watching the Tea Creek documentary. Yeah, I thought it was really inspirational. So the model of having that mentorship and that skills building, like it being a training place and a place for people to come together. Um, I I would love for there to be a place like that. And I feel like in Labrador as well, like something I forgot to mention at the beginning when I was talking about my positionality. Like I'm a graduate student at the Labrador campus as well, so I'm doing my doctorate in Arctic and subarctic futures, and like the mandate of the unit of the campus there is really to like decolonize education and to provide like land-based approaches to learning and education. So I've gotten to have a lot of those experiences there and through my education there as well. So I feel like even like the Pie Center, so in Happy Valley Goose Bay, like there's the Pie Center for Northern and Boreal food systems. And I feel like, yeah, up in Labrador, like maybe we're still at an earlier phase of our agricultural endeavors and relearning that and having that be a community-based thing. But there's some really good stuff happening as well, I feel like. And maybe it's providing something similar, or it could provide something similar for some people in the community with like how Justice was having that experience, even over a few short months of really healing and feeling that dignity in the work that he was doing. So I felt I could relate to those experiences a little bit as well in some of the land-based experiences I've had down at the Labrador campus too. Yeah, I think that's my main reflections from the documentary.
Awesome. So the term food sovereignty, you brought it up, and sustainability and security and everything that goes along with it. And really, food sovereignty often comes up in conversation, but the meaning of food sovereignty shifts based on who's living it. So some food sovereignty to a 14-year-old right now is Walmart. Because if you have milk a brown cow, you get chocolate milk. And food security in a lot of Indigenous communities as it goes along is not about, the Western machine of make money. It's and the people. So how does that look to be that food secure? And that's what I loved about the panel earlier with the hubs. That's about sharing and making sure that everyone is fed, not about ginormous export markets and making sure that everything happens. Well, that is so similar to what happens in Indigenous communities and populations just to feed their own. So when we think about Indigenous food sovereignty, what do you think it looks like in the work that you're doing here? Whether that's really getting into it and doing it 6 months a year, whether that's a farm or whether that's back in the restaurant. What does Indigenous food security look like through your lens?
So food security and food sovereignty kind of go hand in hand. I like to think of it in terms of food sovereignty. One of the things that sets us apart from our history, Indigenous people apart from non-Indigenous people in the history, is the loss of Indigenous people's ability to govern themselves and to be to self-determine how they want to live and do things. And that food is the foundation of any society. And like Hilary talked about, food is a very important part of all cultures. Newfoundlanders, food is such a huge part of Newfoundland culture. And it's the same with Indigenous peoples. The difference is that Indigenous peoples were marginalized, our group specifically, and we were told that you have to accept the systems that we're giving to you, and you no longer have the ability to decide how you're going to produce, how you're going to share, or even how you're going to value those things. And so to me, food sovereignty is directly related to self-determination and self-governance. So, and I did take some notes because my brain goes a million miles an hour.
And the good news is I've never had a bad potluck. So there's that.
Meatballs, yeah, meatballs. That's what I think of when I think of potluck is meatballs, because everybody brings the meatballs. The other thing is dignity. When I think about Indigenous sovereignty and some of the things that we're trying to build into my farm, but also the association and the way we approach agriculture in general, is to make sure that we maintain the dignity of the people that we're serving, and that's Indigenous or non-Indigenous, but in this context, Indigenous people. It's it, you lose your dignity when you become over dependent upon charity. And so sometimes I think non-Indigenous people, they look at, okay, how do we, when we look at reconciliation and how do we help empower Indigenous peoples, Indigenous nations to regain their dignity? And some of those have been answered. You know, we see the way that society and the nation is approaching reconciliation, and there have been many strides, but there's still so much distance. So we need to be able to control and have the ability to, but also the sovereignty to control, even when we get help, that help can't come with strings attached. You know, the old saying, we hand up, not a handout. I don't even like hand up. Just come and share with us. It's a relationship is two ways. So we share and you share. And both parties have dignity that way. So that's what comes to mind there. The other thing is there's, you know, Boyd mentioned that our people, so the Innu were nomadic, Inuit largely transhuman, nomadic certain times of the year. And we are different and distinct from Jacob and Tea Creek and those nations in that part of British Columbia, in that, yes, our past is a little different. But one thing that I've learned, you know, now that agriculture and growing food has come back into discussion within our communities from talking to our elders, is that we did agriculture. Even as nomadic and transhuman people, we did agriculture. It's just hard to recognize if you've never seen it that way. My grandfather would take me berry picking, and we would return to the same places year after year, because when I talked to my grandfather, the way he lived before we were moved into settled communities was we moved 3 to 4 times a year, depending on the cycles and the animal movements and everything else. But we had the same, we had the advantage, at least in Nunatuhut, that we lived to the same 3 or 4 different places, regions at least. And so we would go and we would forage, but those were not owned, but they were stewarded by us. There's no private, you know, we didn't think about things in terms of the land as private. This one owns this one, this one owns this one. That changed a little bit with trapping. When the trapping came about, people had their trap lines. That's my trap line, stay off, right? But we would go to these places, and my grandparents would always tell me, we pick the berries, but we also clear out some of the other stuff so the berries can expand. So when we come back next year, there's going to be more berries. So we did agriculture. It doesn't look like what we expect to see in modern terms of agriculture. And then finally, I mean, I think I mentioned this already, but food as a pathway to restore identity and dignity and community power. If all of our communities can be self-sufficient, whether that's Indigenous or non-Indigenous, we're stronger as a whole. You know, and we can all be proud of our differences. You know, a lot of people, some people have bristled at the multicultural thing, but here we are in a North America where Europeans came and there were people already here, and now we're both here and nobody's going home. There's no home to go to. So we have to live together, and I believe we can. And the key, we don't have to erase our differences and we can celebrate those, because I think whether Indigenous or non-Indigenous, whether you're part of an Indigenous or non-Indigenous community, we all share the same things, but we look at it in a different way. We just see the world in a slightly different way. But the same things that are important to you are important to us. We just frame it differently. We want our dignity. We want to be able to raise our kids the way that our ancestors and our parents taught us to raise our kids. That's what you want. You want a safe community? That's what we want. So there's much more similarities between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people than we think. And I think it's the bridge building that needs to happen. And it's places like Tea Creek, and it's conferences like this, and it's sessions like this that are going to make the real difference.
I like that, Brian. For me, food sovereignty is, I mean, it's kind of simple. just for myself, like food sovereignty for me would be for us and our family specifically. And like, I think it was Richard that was saying, like, you wanted to do this to be with your family, with your kids more, right? And like, that's the same for us. That's our main motivation, was to spend more time as a family with our kids. And so like food sovereignty would be, our ability to do that, to grow the food we want to grow, to live the life we want to live, and to have to be self-sufficient. I can teach this to my kids, and they can continue to, teach their kids. And so for me, it's like more food sovereignty for us as a family. And then once we get there, I feel like we branch out, and then I want to, empower the community to do the same, much like what Jacob at Tea Creek is doing, right? It was a beautiful documentary. It really did move me. It's something that I think, should be more, there should be more Tea Creeks. There should be, because we have a lot of, like, our people are hurting. And it's hard to see, but it brings me a lot of hope to see things like what Jacob's doing at Tea Creek, to see people like Justice, we have 100 justices, in our community that just need that mentoring, that space where they feel respected, valuable, yeah, sorry. Yeah, you can take over.
Okay. Yeah, so just reflecting on like what food sovereignty means to me. So yeah, I was reflecting on that question a little bit, and I had thought about it as both like a right and a responsibility. So, and also like our access to food and our relationship to the land as being like a gift. So like Brian was talking about some traditional practices like berry picking, and how you had to do that in an honorable way in order to ensure that you're taking care of the land, so that you're not looking at these berries as a commodity or something to be taken or hoarded, or that's my private property. You're looking at it like this is a gift. And like when you frame like the things that the land provides, or when you're living a subsistence lifestyle, you think of those things not as commodities but as gifts, and that really changes your perception towards like your relationship with the land and what the land provides as well. So while I say like I feel like food sovereignty is our right in a way, I think that it comes with so much more, because it's not mine for the taking. It's mine to be in relationship with. It's mine to take care of. It's mine to give back to. It's mine to, especially in the context of Labrador, like protect essentially. So it's the right to participate in those traditional ways, and to pass that on to your children, and to repair any like anything that's kind of come in between that through things like colonization, like residential schools, like intergenerational trauma, like even like the market economy and things like that. Um, so it's your right to participate, and to forage, to hunt, to be on your traditional lands, but also it comes with a lot of responsibility too. So you have to do that in a way that is respectful, that is living in reciprocity, that you care about, the practices, how you're going about it. You teach that to your children. You don't take more than you need. You share with your community. And I think that's like a really good framework as well for, sustainability. So if we took those teachings, if we took those and revitalized and shared through intergenerational knowledge transfer, through places like Tea Creek, through experiences like this, then I think that could be a pathway to sustainability as well.
Yeah, and I think at the heart of, Indigenous agriculture is this deep well of knowledge, way of listening to the land, the seasons, caring for relationships that sustain us. And I think to Brian's point, it's just a different language. So come from a centennial family, Western culture farm. My grooming for that farm was getting pulled out of bed at 2:30 in the morning to pull a calf because my arms are longer than my dad's, and that's just how it worked. Your arms are longer, let's go. Well, he learned that from his dad, who learned it from his dad, who learned it from his dad. And I've never met a farmer, period, that doesn't take care of the land, the animals, or what it is that they do it. It's just a different language. No farmer wants to absolutely pillage the land that they're pulling crop up off and not have a crop next year. But it's not the same way of viewing it. So it's not about that inherent, deep ingrained connection all the time. For them, that's the way of life. But it's just how we communicate. It's just how we have that conversation. We'll go down the road and stop by our neighbors like, oh, how's the crop running? Or how's the animals looking? But we don't think to stop to an Indigenous community and do the same thing. Because there is that fear of approach. There's that fear of offending, that we don't want to say something wrong. We understand what's happening. We understand there's been traumas and there's been atrocities that have happened. So we don't want to do the right thing. So we just do nothing. But the way of understanding is the same across all these blankets. When we think about truth and reconciliation and doing that, go to a place of worship in any town. That's where people gather. What a great place to have a conversation because they can't go anywhere. So you go to that and you learn and you understand. I'm from, like I said, Saskatchewan, probably arguably one of the most racist pockets in Canada, just out of the lack of diversity. And they were opening a mosque in Moose Jaw with a bunch of cowboys everywhere. So you can imagine the conversations and the comments and the stuff that goes with it. The two people at the opening of that mosque that were just about at the front of the line were a 6'2" white guy and an Indigenous woman. Not because we're going to worship there, but because we want to understand. And we don't want to share something on Facebook from a cousin's brother's friend's sister in 2018 that isn't true or correct or anything else, but the power of social media and the way it goes. So the learning to understand, I think, is the biggest thing in the Indigenous knowledge and action. So when we think about Indigenous knowledge systems, seasonal cycles, traditional practices, how would you guys say that that guides how you care for your farm or your homestead?
I feel like it ties back to what I was kind of said, my previous answer, just that, can you just state the question one more time so I can,
I just made it up.
okay,
So
you said,
not really, but
I think
how do Indigenous knowledge systems guide when you care for your farm or your homestead?
right. So I think it comes to like, yeah, your values and that worldview of viewing, like I have no dominance over, like I don't perceive that I have any, like, yeah, I don't ownership towards or dominance over like the land or even like our homestead, really. Like, sure, we own the land, it's our property, but just viewing it as something that you're in relationship with and that really is provided as a gift. Like when someone gives you a gift, you feel gratitude for it. And so practicing gratitude for the gifts that are given and viewing things as interdependent, viewing things as cyclical, appreciating that when you're involved in these practices of growing or cultivating good soil. We take those values to our approach at our homestead. So trying to be regenerative in how we're going about things, trying to improve soil quality, build good soil. So like up in Goose Bay, like it's all sand, right? Because of our like geology and the glaciers moving through, like it's mostly sand. There's not a lot of topsoil really. So like when we bought our property, like that's been what we've had ahead of us, is just like trying to build good soil, bring in good soil.
The owners had removed the topsoil that was there, so it
Yeah.
was just sand. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying not to be wasteful, trying to, bring any surplus back to community, family, sharing. Um, yeah, that's like I would say like how our worldview, or how our, those indigenous knowledge systems, impact what we're doing at our homestead. We also like try to live a really like land-based lifestyle, and try to reconnect back to that. So approaching those things in the same way, like in an honorable way, in the same way that you would have been taught by your uncles or, your father, not taking more than you need, that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah, and I like what you said about like the gift, right? It's if you like Jacob and T Creek, they give away all their food, right? And he clearly gets so much meaning from that. And I like that because when you commodify things, and when everything is just a dollar sign, you know, the relationship between the producer and the consumer is kind of just a like a yeah, it's transactional, exactly. So I feel like when we give away, when we think of things as gifts, and when we give to the community, to people, that you really build that relationship, right? Like if you sell the book we were reading, Braiding Sweetgrass,
Serviceberry.
the service.
Robin Wall Kimmerer. So yeah, we were. It's like one of them is some of the textbooks that I'm reading in school too. But yeah, we've been doing some reading, by, an Indigenous writer, Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's also like a botanist, and a plant botanist or a plant ecologist, and she belongs to the Potawatomi First Nation as well. Yeah.
And one of the things she said is like when you do that transactional, when you do that transaction, that's basically where the relationship ends. But like when you give something to somebody and you see them in the community, you want to have a talk, like you want to chat. If we gave potatoes to somebody, you ask like, oh, how was your meal, right? What did you like about it? This type of thing. But I think that's one of the big things that like we're trying to do more, is to just have more gratitude for the land, for the people, for our relationships, and to kind of instill that in our kids as well. Because yeah, things are hard, like for sure. It's we have two small kids, and we're trying to build this homestead, and then there is that financial part that you have to consider, right? We can't just not work. And we're not at a place where we produce enough to make any sort of income. So we balance work with raising our kids. I'm a stay-at-home dad, and it's like the best thing in the world, but it doesn't pay for a lot of these big upfront costs that we do have. So like we really had to touch base more with you, and to avail of some of those opportunities and some of that funding source. So like we can get to a place where, hey, we no longer need that, and we can actually give out to other people in the community, right? So yeah, I think that's kind of like what we're thinking.
Aspirational in that way,
Yeah.
I would say. But
Big
yeah,
aspirations.
yeah. And something else that Robin Walkemer was talking about is like that, from an Indigenous perspective, or in Indigenous, communities, like gifts are something that's cycled through the community. It's not something that you hold on to. You don't hoard something for your like personal wealth or gain. There's a, understanding that gifts are meant to be cycled and are meant to be passed through. And you know that when you provide for or you share with, it's just inherently understood that community, like that's going to come back to you. Like it's things are, it's a practice of reciprocity. So I think kind of that guides us, but it is a hard thing. Like Jacob said, like there's a fragility towards it because it's a bit counter culture, right? Like it can be hard to be successful when you want to go about things in that way. It's hard to know how to move forward and keep those values. So it's like you have the desire to do things, you have the aspirations to do things in a certain way, in a good way. But it comes with a lot, you're met with a lot of resistance. So it takes time and effort and it's a continuous process, but it would be beautiful if and wonderful if in the future by people working more collectively, working more in community with each other and more of these types of initiatives that are supported, if we could get closer to that, if that could be something that we could continue to, that sort of sustainability, for sure.
I'm going to be pragmatic and I'm just going to refer to my notes really quickly to answer that question. So, the Indigenous knowledge in our work, just as they have said, they've covered pretty much all of it, but I've got a little extra something I want to add. Land reading obviously is something we do, the reciprocity, the sharing, and that's the little bit I want to add. When we had that presentation this morning, what in the world? What's the name of the organization? The first session, Second Harvest. And you had mentioned gleaning. We have this thing when we were planning the farm. My wife's not super involved in the farm side of things, doesn't interest her. She supports us in enormous other ways through the family and everything. But one of the things that we do talk about is how the farm fits into our family and our history and everything moving forward. So from that perspective, I mean, she's fully supportive. She's just not interested in the geeky plant things and soil science and all of that I'm into. But where I was going with that is you mentioned gleaning, and I'm a Christian as well. And in the Bible, if you look in the Old Testament, the Hebrews had a command. I don't even remember what book it is, but there was a command that when you're harvesting your fields, if you miss some, you leave it so that the community can come in and glean. So we recognized that as something that aligns with our culture as well. And one thing we wanted to do, we called it, I like big fancy words, so we called it strategic overproduction. So that we got extra to share, like that we're not counting on the revenue from that. We're already out there trying to grow these things. It doesn't cost that much to put a little extra in, say 10%. And then you have that you can take and you can share. And that's something that can be implemented in any community. The other thing I wanted to add is like the Indigenous knowledge, how that applies to my work. I think Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous worldview in some ways are inseparable. So I want to share something that I hope, I'll try to be quick. I want to share something that I hope is helpful. There's Indigenous nations and cultures are not a monolith. They're not one thing. There is diversity. And even with, so there's this overarching Indigenous worldview that I kind of want to share with you just very quickly and very succinctly. But before I do that, I want to recognize there are Indigenous cultures that don't subscribe to this as well. This just happens to be in North America, sort of an overarching, very pervasive within Indigenous cultures. And that is the way in which you view the land, the relationship with the land. And the exceptions to that are like Indigenous European and Indigenous people like Irish, right? The Irish don't view the land the way that I'm going to describe it here, but they're Indigenous to their land, right? So, we've got to be aware that there are always exceptions. But the thing I want to share is that you guys have probably often heard that the way that Indigenous people view their relationship with the land, and this is true with Innu and Inuit, all the Inuit groups. You've heard we view the land as kin. And my father is a residential school survivor, and so there's been a lot that's been lost in our family and not handed down. And being, as I could just pass as any one of you. You know what I mean? I could just walk out in this community, tell people I'm from here, and no one would question it. So growing up, I mean, I remember sitting in school and being told, while I knew the difference on some level, I've been told there were no Indigenous people in Newfoundland and Labrador. And, I'm sitting here in my community and it's just, it's craziness. So I was indoctrinated into the way you guys see things. That's how I was educated. And it wasn't until I was able to reconnect with other elders, because my grandparents, I'd go berry picking with my grandfather, but we didn't have them very long. And my dad didn't share the stuff. I wasn't sure if I was going to bring that up, but we view the land as kin. And I always thought that meant the land is like a member of our family. But that's not what it means. So you can separate Indigenous spirituality from the worldview in that the land itself, when we say the land, we mean the ecosystem. It's not a single being or a single life. It's a collective life force. There's so much life in the whole of the ecosystem. And we view it as kin, as in we view it as family, not a single thing that we relate to, but a thing that we are a part of, a collective that we're a part of. So when we are thinking about the land, that's where the reciprocity comes in, is in any healthy relationship, if any one side takes and does not give back, you have a dysfunctional relationship. And so I try my best, like in our farm, to always, now, I mean, I've trained myself now, and as I reconnect with my own culture and everything else, I'm realizing that this feels like, I'm very pragmatic. I don't base everything on feeling, but this feels right. And I can't always put words to it, but I know that this is making my grandparents and my great-grandparents proud, the way that we're doing things differently. And so it's not just, some people call it Indigenous science, Indigenous knowledge. You know, it's not just those bullet points, those things you could put in a textbook, but there's sort of a philosophical, a relational thing there too, the Indigenous worldview that informs the Indigenous knowledge and gives some insight in how you can implement it into your life and into your community again, where it was born, where it came out of. So anyway, I hope that's helpful.
I feel like that was really well said, Brian, and I'm glad you touched on that point, those perspectives as well.
The best thing about having a good panel is they can answer my questions without me asking questions. So that is awesome. There is going to be more time to get together tonight for questions and answers, but I want to thank you for sharing your stories and your wisdom. You each reminded us that food sovereignty isn't just a concept, it's living practice. It's rooted in relationship, it's culture, it's care for the future. And you know what? What I always say is let these conversations continue after today. You talked about church. Church starts on Monday. It's not about the hour on Sunday that people are holier than thou. It's how we conduct ourselves through the week. So let these conversations continue tonight at the networking, around your kitchen tables, in the community gardens, and on the land that sustains us all. So thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you soon.